Hi, welcome. I'm Mary and I hook books. I crochet things inspired by books I read. And I have been in such an everything slump for the last few months. I haven't done any monthly wrap-ups. So I would like to just talk about some of the best books that I read in the first quarter of 2025. Starting with some nonfiction, I read Thicker Than Water, and this was an interview with one of the scientists involved in Theranos, and I was very much like, hey, how did this even happen when it comes to Theranos? And this answered a lot of my questions. It was a really great, basically like an interview. And, okay, money, bye. Then I read Don't Trust Your Gut, Using Data to Get What You Really Want in Life. And this was so good. There was obviously a lot of very well-researched data and very applicable, tangible ways of improving your overall happiness in life immediately, which I really do appreciate in a self-help slash like scientific nonfiction book. And I listened to Down the Rabbit Hole, and oh my goodness, I was not that into the girls next door, but I knew of them. And this memoir, like, she was the least crazy of the crazy Playboy girls, and I really loved hearing how she dealt with that relationship that was not super healthy and how she grew afterwards and what she's up to now. So I really related to her and I really liked how she told her story. And one of my favorite things that I read this last quarter was Get Well Soon, and I loved the voice of this author. She is so cheeky and funny, and it is a little bit depressing. Sometimes we, leave starving children to die of disease because we're human, but sometimes we also come together to help each other because we're human. I recommend The Chronicles of St. Mary's. It is a wonderful kind of wacky palette cleanse, and I really just needed the wacky, fun, happy goofiness in my life with all the dark stuff happening in the world right now. So I have read, I think it's 7, 8, 9 in the last 3 months. What Could Possibly Go Wrong, which, like, who even asks that? And Lies, Damned Lies in History, and then An Argumentation of Historians, because apparently the collective noun of historians is an argumentation. And these were a little bit more grim and a little bit more into the meta plot than I'm used to for St. Mary's, but they were still really good. Listening to the audiobook of the last one, I had to stifle giggles in an inappropriate time because it is just periodically they have those laugh out loud moments. And Mary Maxwell, she is one of my favorite protagonists ever. She's an older woman who is very confident, who is not skinny. I wouldn't necessarily call her overweight, but her doctor always does tell her to lose about 10 pounds. And she's older, educated, confident, and I love her so much. So this is a really great series if you just need something as a palate cleanse and just to bring that happiness and positivity into your life. So if you can stomach observing historical events in contemporary time, because they don't call it time travel, then I would pick these up. My 4-star reads were The Road to Roswell, and this is a very fun alien invasion buddy road trip story with like the teeny tiniest little bit of romance. Ring Shout. I don't even know how to explain what's going on in Ring Shout. It is sci fantasy with aliens called Ku Kluxes that control the clan, or at least like are involved in the clan, because you know humans are also awful. And there's a magical sword, and it was like a fever dream, but it was an amazing historical sci fantasy fever dream. And we used to live here. This, I feel like I can't really tell you what about it I loved without spoilers, but a family comes to the door of this couple that bought this house, and they're like, hey, we used to live here. We just kind of want to look around. And I don't want spoilers, but there is kind of like a science fiction fantasy element in here where I was expecting just domestic horror. So it is still really good, and that's all I can tell you without spoiling it. I also read Horror Movie, and this is one of the most genuinely chilling, scary books that I have read in recent memory. And they're making a horror movie in, I think it was like the 90s, and you don't know what happened. It became like a cult classic even though it was never released, and there's one person who's still around telling the story of the making of this movie and the creepy stuff that happened during it. My 4.25 reads include The Last Thing to Burn, and this is, I wouldn't necessarily call it a thriller until about the last quarter, but it is a tale of a Vietnamese woman who has been trafficked. Spoilers! Okay. And then Secondhand Souls is the second book that started with A Dirty Job, and I mean, a toddler might be capital D death now. Like, it's adorable. You could tell it was written a long time after the first book. It's a lot more updated, but I love the characters. Christopher Moore does amazing characters, and it is wacky and fun and also kind of sweet and heartfelt. And then My Darling Dreadful Thing is a rare historical that I really enjoyed because it is historical horror with a sapphic relationship and ghosts. So if you liked The Haunting of Hill House the show, I think you might really like this. And then Snow Globe is a Korean translation, and people live in this snow globe where they are recorded 24/7 for the enjoyment of the people outside the snow globe and all the dystopian horror that is reality TV. And then Raisins and Almonds is another historical, and this is in the Phryne Fisher mysteries, and I love Phryne. She is a lady detective. She's smart, she's savvy, she's sex positive. She's just awesome, and this was a really well crafted mystery. I'm not exactly sure how historically accurate it is, but Carrie Greenwood does tend to do her research. My 4.5 star books include Dead of Winter, and I am loving Darcy Coates. I can't believe it took me so long to discover her because her name is floated around quite a bit. This is an isolated, closed circle mystery, and I love that. I love when people get snowed in somewhere, and they do get snowed in somewhere, and, well, people start dying. That's kind of the premise of most closed circle mysteries. But this was very well crafted, very twisty, very turny. I really enjoyed the atmosphere and the characters. And then Someone in the Attic is just a terrifying premise. This woman sells her company, moves to her home country. So I believe they're back in England or Ireland. I can't remember which one. And weird things start happening. And they're like, am I seeing things? And it's the, well, are you an unreliable female narrator? No, they don't go down that road that much, but there's a little like, there's no one in the attic. There's no one in your house. What are you talking about? But what if there were someone in the attic? And then The Haunting of Ashburn House. I really enjoyed this twist on a haunted house story. I like how Darcy Coates really does switch up some of the traditional horror tropes that you get, and she puts a little twist on it that makes it a little bit more original and less cliched. And then So Thirsty. I love Rachel Harrison. I love her characters. And yes, it's a vampire book, but it is mostly about this woman and her birthday with her best friend and their very complicated relationship. And The Other People is a CJ Tudor, and he's another author that I've recently come to enjoy very much. And this is every parent's worst nightmare. You're driving down the highway and you see a child in the back seat of another car, and you're like, no, that's my kid. What is my kid doing in that car? And then you get home and you're informed that your child is actually missing, and you spend the next 10 years trying to find that child. And CJ Tudor does put just the smallest little bits of supernatural elements. This has the least supernatural of all the books that I've read from him, but there are those little elements that I actually really enjoy. Overall, it's a very interesting mystery thriller adjacent. And then the Book of Accidents, it was very long and it kind of felt like it sometimes, but amazing character work. I loved the science fiction elements that were in there. It was a very good horror mystery element. We have our child empath and a sociopath that is the other side of the coin. And yeah, spoilers. My only 4.75 that was not nonfiction is Drunk on All Your Strange New Words, and I had this forever. People had been telling me to read it, and I finally did, and it's a very interesting first contact / living with alien ambassadors murder mystery turn buddy comedy toward the end. It was a lot of fun. My 5-star books this last quarter: The Resistors, and I had read I, Auto House by this author a while back, and that's why I put this on my TBR. It is like a futuristic 1984, and resistance isn't just protests and violence. Resistance is also joy and community, and I loved that about this book. This is what I needed in my life right now. And then Cackle, another Rachel Harrison. Yes, it's witchy, but again, it's more about a woman getting over her awful ex, and adult female friendships. And I loved this so much. And The Hiding Place, another CJ tutor, and a teacher goes back to his hometown, gets a job there. Everyone's like, why are you back? And it is a little suspicious. And there are some supernatural elements wound in with just a rough past in a small town and dealing with how people in small towns, a lot of the time, cycles of trauma and systems just repeat and repeat and repeat, and you can never get out of them. And it's a very well told, well crafted, slow burn mystery. And probably the favorite thing that I have read in the last 3 months, Set My Heart to 5. And I loved this. The character just reminds me so much of my cats. Like, how I talk to my cats is how he is. And he's just, he tries to stay so positive, even though, like, there's some bad stuff that happens to robots in this world, and he sees it firsthand. But he's learning emotions and feelings through movies, and he wants to go to Hollywood to make his own movie, but no one can know that he's a robot. And I love the characters. The plot was fun, and if you pick up anything, and especially if you need a mood boost, pick up Set My Heart to 5. And Warm Up America works with Made with Love, and they yarn bomb places with warm clothing from September to January. So I'm working on stash busting a lot of my stuff, a lot of the yarn I've had forever, so I can buy more yarn. So I'm making a couple scarves, matching hats, so I'm making these collections to donate come September and to work through some of my yarn stash. So those were the best books that I read in the first quarter of 2025. Let me know what you're reading. Let me know if you're crocheting anything, if you have any big projects that you're working on. And please take care of yourselves, eat a good meal, get some sleep, get some exercise, go for a walk, have coffee with a friend, do something to feed your soul. And as always, shoulders back, heads up, and breathe.